Hey guys, Chad here with Midlife Classic Cars. Today we're doing an interview with Scott Kolecki. He's the author of the Corvette Concept Cars book that just released. The subtitle is Developing America's Favorite Sports Car. Really appreciate him taking the time to do an interview with us, so let's get into it. Hey guys, today we got another great interview with Scott Kolecki. Is that correct? Scott Kolecki? I got it right?
Got it. You
And I'm
got it.
really excited to have him here to talk about his new book, Corvette Concept Cars, Developing America's Favorite Sports Car. I took this book for my vacation in Arizona last week, and this is what I went through and read. I'll tell you what, this is not a Father's Day coffee table, but this is an in-depth, a lot of great pictures, a lot of detail has been put into this book. This is anyone that's into concept cars, wanting to know how cars are developed, or in a Corvette nut, obviously, is going to love this book. So I'm really excited to have Scott here to do this interview. Really appreciate you doing this, Scott.
Yeah, well, Chad, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So Scott, why don't you tell me what inspired you to write a book on Corvette concept cars?
Sure. So, writing about Corvettes, I started working or writing about Corvettes back in 2010. I launched a website called corsport.com, which was based on an idea that I'd seen on 2020 about a group of guys who had started a different Corvette website to fund their car addiction. So I thought I could do the same thing. And working with a buddy of mine, we launched Corsport and started writing about Corvettes on a daily basis. Been doing that ever since and publishing content on the web. A few years ago, CarTech Publishing approached me, having seen my work online, and asked if I'd be interested in doing a book on the Corvette with them. That allowed us to, of course, I said yes, and we started working on ideas for a book that was unique to the market. There are so many books already published about the
Yeah.
Corvette. We wanted a different angle. We wanted something that was new, something that was fresh. So the idea, I think it was actually Wes's idea to do a book on Corvette concepts, on the design and the history of the car from the perspective of the people that designed it.
Yeah.
So I started doing the homework on it, and while other authors had touched on that topic in their books, there was nobody that had ever really told the story from that perspective, and so we thought it gave us a unique angle to tell a Corvette story that no one had done before.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's why I was excited about, because in 30 years of selling automotive books, I think I've only ever seen one book that was a picture book that had Corvette, and no depth. It was just
yeah.
a few pictures and that's it. And this, I mean, the depth you went into to write this is pretty insane. How did you get the information to write this?
So there was a whole team of people that were involved in the creation of this book. The biggest contributors, the Corvette Museum was huge. I got to work with Betty Hardison in the archives up there. Daniel Decker, who is one of the employees of the museum that helps manage the exhibits. Derek Moore, who was the museum curator at the time. They invited me in and allowed me to work with the team or work as part of with the team to put this book together. Spent a lot of time in the archives. There was a day that was set up with the museum where I was able to come in early in the morning. And as I walked into the archives, they had a table full of content that they had pulled out of their libraries and had set up for me that told the history of the Corvette. And it was, original letters and documents that were published by the designers and the engineers and the people involved in the Corvette's evolution. It was published literature by General Motors. It was stuff that was never seen or rarely seen in the public eye that just was part of the car's production. So I spent the day going through these binders. It was a whole table, like I said, about 7 foot wide collection of binders, and spent the day researching, going through, taking notes. And from that was really kind of the genesis of the book. Began assembling the narrative that you have in your hand. In addition to the museum, was able to work with General Motors, which was a huge privilege. John Kairos at the Heritage Center was involved. He helped not only with research and with information on the cars, but with a lot of the pictures that you see in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then outside of that, just being able to talk to other enthusiasts and collectors and people that have been in the know about these cars. Joe Bortz in Chicago, he has the Bortz Auto Collection, and he actually owns a couple of the original concepts. Dan Vaughn, who owns a website called Concept Cars, and his website is replete with information not only on these Corvettes but concept cars from manufacturers around the globe. And folks like that just came out of the woodwork as I was reaching out and asking for information that were willing to help and participate in the book. It was a huge, uh, for me, it was a huge honor to be able to work with these people because there are a lot of people that donated their time and efforts to tell the story.
So it really sounds like GM and Corvette they were really excited for you to do this book.
They were, and I think initially because I'm, other than the websites, was kind of an unknown author. I think there was some reservations at first, but I shared examples of the work, and the feedback I received was positive, and I eventually they were willing to engage and be part of it. And since that time, I've gotten to know John Cairo specifically. John and I have become friends. He's the individual I worked with at General Motors. And he's worked with me not only on this first book, but on a second book that I am in the process of editing right now on the Camaro. Kind of tells the same story about the Camaro, which will be out next May, Father's Day book for next year.
I'm excited about that. We'll do another interview to let you inform everybody about that book. I'm really excited for that.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. I'd be honored.
Most definitely.
But yeah, he was instrumental in the writing of both books. And as we were doing this, his time and his generosity of spending the time with me to help put this together was instrumental in its success.
So is there anyone else you owe credit to with this book?
Oh, the list is long.
I saw there's a photographer in here that has a similar last name to yours.
Yes.
What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so Joe Kolecki Photography, out of Cleveland, Ohio. He's my brother, my younger brother.
That's awesome.
He and I have talked about doing something like this for decades, for a very long time. And when the book came along, there was a unique situation where the museum had a collection of the concept cars that were going to be in the book, and they were willing to allow me to bring a photographer into the museum to photograph the cars. And so, first person I thought of was Joe. I said, "Hey, this is the opportunity we've been looking for." And he came down to Bowling Green. I met him up in Bowling Green, and we spent a day working with Daniel Decker, working with the museum, going behind the scenes, going over the wall and into the exhibits to photograph some of these one of a kind cars. And it was just a huge, very exciting opportunity for us to be able to do that with the museum, but then also to be able to work together and to be able to do that was awesome.
Yeah, and so tell me that's great, for you to be able to work with your brother like that. I think that's Absolutely. Great and special. So what's your favorite chapter in the book, the writing? What got you the most excited to write?
So the story of the mid-engine concept cars, and I've shared this with a lot of people. People ask me of that same question. I like that section because it's a history that a lot of people don't know about. When the C8 came out in 2020, there was a lot of criticism that GM was destroying the Corvette by building a mid-engine car.
Yeah.
And my response to that is, guys, this was always meant to be, the Corvette was supposed to be a mid-engine car. When Zora Duntov came on the scene in the late 50s, that was the first thing he started looking at, was how do we turn this into a mid-engine car? How do we follow what the European market's doing, building race cars and sports cars that are mid-engine? And the history is replete with examples of a mid-engine, rear engine and mid-engine concepts that were built as early as 1960, all the way up through the late 80s and early 90s. And then, of course, we have the car we have today. But that technology that's in that car today started with these early concepts that are in the book. So as you know, as people go into the book, I hope they discover that the mid-engine idea is not new to Corvette.
Yeah, it's not new.
It's integral to its history.
I think one thing I got from the book is, how the Corvette really was almost a test bed vehicle for things to trickle down into passenger cars and other vehicles.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I think more so than a lot of cars, the Corvette, the concepts, the design concepts that are in the book, the technology concepts that are in the book, those cars were test beds for vehicle development, and not just for performance vehicles, but for technology that showed up in the cockpit, whether that was environmental or audio or whatever. The technologies that evolved in the Corvette design eventually trickled down. A lot of that technology trickled down into the production cars that we have today. And again, I think if people go through the narrative, they read the book, they're going to find that is a common theme, starting all the way back with the early concepts through today, that what was being developed in those design models, those concept cars, eventually a lot of it found its way into the production cars that they're driving to this very day.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Because I've grown up around Corvettes. You do see, components and other things trickle down into cars.
Without
Um,
doubt.
so when you were writing the book, like how long did it take you to do this? Because like we were saying, it's fairly in depth. I mean, did this a year or two? How long did it take?
So it took a year to write the book, and that was based on the timeline that CarTech provided to me. And of course, that was a full year of writing. I spent a lot of nights and weekends, and I owe a lot to my family
Yeah.
for their generosity and their patience. Um, Started the book in September of 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And it, been fortunate enough, even with that happening, to be able to go to the museum and do that research that I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier. But uh, pretty much a full year of writing, and that started day one all the way up to the completion date, which was in the last day of July in 2021.
Hmm.
And that was nights, that was weekends. There was any spare minute of time that I could find to sit down at the computer and do some of the
Yeah.
content for the book.
It sounds like you might have a wife and family that's really supportive of you taking the time to write.
Oh man, you have no idea. My wife has been hugely supportive. She's been an integral part of this. Even though she didn't have a lot in direct contribution, though she did help edit the book. She was one of the early readers. Her patience and her willingness to allow me to do this project was instrumental to its success. Um, and that's been true not just with the book, but with the website I mentioned earlier. I've been doing this for a long time, and she's always been supportive of the process and the time that's spent doing this work. Even though there are things that we could be doing on the weekends of the family or going out and spending time doing other things. When I needed to work, she always gave me the time to do that. And I'm super grateful to her
That
for that.
that's awesome. I'm glad you have that support because, like I said, the depth this book goes into, it shows you had a big support group when writing this. Whether it
Oh yeah,
be getting content, your family taking care of you and allowing you the time to write. I think that's the number one thing I want to say is like people need to read this book. Like you've spent a lot of time working on the research of this book, and it's got way more depth than a lot of other ones that I've seen come across midlife classic cars and everything. Is there
I
any?
really
Oh, go ahead.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I just really appreciate that, but yeah, I cut you off. So go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you, what else would you like to tell people about the book?
Sure. So one of the things I tell anybody that's reading the book is it was exhaustively researched. There's a lot of time that went into trying to get it right. I'll also tell you that there's a lot of history in there that is um, it's based on information that was available at the time, and sometimes it was based on conflicting information. If you talk to two or three different people about this history and about these cars, you might get three very different stories about the same car.
Hmm.
So being able to disseminate that information, to go through it and really tell a story that was factual and accurate, but at the same time based on incomplete information at times, I want readers to understand that the book is as good as I could make it given the information I had available.
Hmm.
But I'm a historian. I understand that new information surfaces all the time,
Hmm.
and if information arises, I would love to hear from the readers. I'd like to know, what others know. Maybe there's someone out there that's going to read it and say, "Hey, I was there. I saw this. Or I know that." And maybe you got this right, but this needs to be revisited or reconsidered. Um, I'm a big fan of that, and I would encourage readers to reach out. I would love to hear from them. I'd love to be able to talk to them more about what they know. If there's something that they can share that's unique to the story. I'm not one of those people that are, no, I wrote a book and this is mine to tell. This is not my history. This is a history
Yeah.
that belongs to all of us. Any enthusiast, any Corvette owner, anybody that's been passionate about cars. So let's make it better. If you know something, let's talk.
And how can people find you to contact you if they have a question or would like to add something?
Sure. So there's several ways. As I mentioned earlier, there are websites that I write for. Coresport.com, which is the Corvette site that started all of this for me back in 2010. I also write for supercars.net and mustangspecs.com. Easiest way to reach me is
Cheating,
if you go
cheating
to
with that Mustang.
yeah, well, yeah, and I am a Chevy bow tie guy through and through, but was asked to do some history on the Mustang, and some of those early Mustangs are pretty cool. The Shelby cars, especially.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
So you're a
Uh,
card nut. You're a card nut.
oh yeah, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I gained a whole new appreciation after watching Ford versus Ferrari. And I know a lot of people that did,
Yeah.
and yeah, I gained a lot more respect for Ford than I had before it. But yeah, those websites. I'm on Facebook. You can look me up either on my personal page, which again, I have no objection if people want to reach out. It's
Okay.
Scott Kolecki is the name. The search for it. It's a pretty unique name. I think you'll have no problem finding me. Or you can go to the Court Sport Facebook page and drop me a note there.
Okay.
Go to the website, just hit the contact us, and I get that information. It reaches several people, but you're asked to reach me by name. It'll find me.
And I'll make sure to put links down so people can find you from this interview too.
Outstanding. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So you say you have another book you're currently in the process of writing, a Camaro book?
Yes, sir. Kind of the same idea as the Corvette concepts. This is the story of the Camaro told from the same perspective through the same lens. It's a little bit more comprehensive in the overall design and development of the Camaro, but it does talk on all of the concepts that were put together for that car as well. And so kind of painted in the same picture as the first book. They're kind of complementary to one another, because if you know the story of the Camaro, you know that the Camaro didn't evolve in a vacuum. It was a lot of the same designers and engineers and same people that were involved in the Corvette touched both cars. So it's kind of fun to be able to tell both stories, because they do share a common history.
So you can cross-reference stories. That's really interesting. I'm really excited for that book to come out too.
I appreciate it. I also had to spot check myself at times to make sure that what I was saying in one matched with what I was saying on the other. And
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was like, okay, I got it right, because it come back to the same information twice. And I tried to write the second one without leaning on the first one at all. It's kind of starting from scratch and doing that same research. So I was glad to see that they lined up pretty well.
That's awesome. So is there anything else you would like to tell us about the book before we end this interview?
Yeah, a couple quick things. One, there's so many names, so many people that were involved, and I just like to shout out to a couple other folks. Richard Earl, who is the grandson of Harley Earl, who was the pioneering designer of the original Corvette. He and I worked together on this book as well. He was a huge part of the story, even though we spent a lot of time talking about his family history and his family's legacy and all the things that Harley Earl did. A lot of that didn't filter into the book just because of space and time. But to be able to work with Richard and to have those conversations was priceless. I've also remained friends over the years, and I'm very grateful for that, to have been able to learn from him and learn about his family and learn about his grandfather specifically.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool friend to have.
It's a pretty incredible friend to have. Yeah, and I mean, he's read the book, he's been supportive of the book, so I'm very grateful for that. Again, I mentioned my family. I just again want to shout out to my wife and kids. Just thank you for always being so supportive, because this was a huge endeavor. Both books, I mean, back to back, did this for 2 years running, plus all the editing and all the other work that comes with it. They've always been very supportive.
That's great. Well, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview with us. And like I said, I'm excited for the book. I'm excited for your next book. I think the Corvette Concept is going to be a great seller for us. And you can check it out at Midlife Classic Cars. And I'm sure it's on other marketplaces you see the Midlife Classic Cars name. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed the interview. Unfortunately, Scott's power went out. He's safe. Everything's okay. But the interview, he got cut out. But we were finishing it up. I really hope you appreciate the interview. It's very nice to have authors come in here and talk about their experience of writing a book. I really enjoy hearing their stories. And I really appreciate Scott taking the time to do this. And a shout out to his everyone that helped him write the book, especially his wife and his brother, who's a photographer. That's really awesome of you guys. As usual, you can find his book at midlifeclassiccars.com or any marketplace where you see the midlifeclassiccars.com name. And remember, we always give a great service of shipping in boxes. This is our box that the book will ship in, and we wrap it up to protect it, and you'll get a free sticker in the book. Also, if you get a chance, subscribe to wherever you're watching this, give it a thumbs up and share it as much as possible. It really helps us get our name out there and get these author interviews out to people can see them. Anyway, I hope everybody's having a great one. Take care, and we'll see you in the next interview.